Last year, I had leukemia. Today, I roll like kickball.
Kids with cancer and blood disorders can get back to being kids through our pediatric hematology and oncology program at RWJ-Barnabas Health and Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey. We diagnose and treat your child's cancer or blood disorder with the most advanced treatments and compassion. Learn more at rwjbh.org/kids cancer and blood disorders. RWJ-Barnabas Health and Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey. Let's beat cancer together.
What happened, Coach?
You got beamed by a fastball. How many fingers am I holding up?
25?
25? Uh-oh.
25? Did you know you can save up to 25% off grocery store prices at BJ's Wholesale Club?
Good call, Ump. I'll save a ton on my Memorial Day cookout.
BJ's deals on patio furniture are a home run, too.
On your feet, son. Do you know where you are?
I'm at BJ's. Look at all the happy shoppers.
Save in-club or shop on BJ's.com and pick up in-club or curbside. BJ's. Absurdly simple savings.
Hello, friends and family, and welcome to another episode of Healthy Minds and Media. I am, as always, Erin Mahone. We are here to talk about mental health and all the different ways that our lives are impacted, and the media is such a huge part of our world. We are constantly influenced by all the different types of media that come through to us every single day, and we're bombarded. So I am joined by Kerri Lynch, the other half of my brain, to start this conversation. We are here to talk about Yellow Jacket.
Is it HBO or Showtime? I can't remember which.
Showtime.
Okay.
We have like a temporary subscription to Showtime.
Yeah, I did it for Dexter.
Oh, yeah.
For the new Dexter series. And then Yellow Jackets just happened to be running pretty much simultaneously. So I was like, and why not?
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't know anything about this show. I decided I walked into like the 4th episode. My husband had been watching it, and it was not on my radar at all.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it.
Well, I remember seeing a trailer with a something. I didn't remember if it was a show or a movie with Juliette Lewis and Christina Ricci. And I was like, oh, fun. What a fun little 90s throwback.
Mm-hmm.
And then it left my head and I didn't know anything else about it. But I was watching this, and like the first 5 minutes that I was watching it, I was like, oh, we have to talk about this on the show because there's lots of stuff about it, but it just a really interesting sort of exploration of trauma, especially trauma that happens at that very sort of pivotal developmental age.
And I also feel like mob mentality is a huge part of it too.
It was really interesting going back and exploring that high school trauma, which was nothing compared to a plane crash where you have to practice cannibalism, like, or you choose to. I'm not really sure what
There's got to be another season of that coming because there's too many questions.
I really was disappointed that they never answered that question, that they started the first episode with this scene that they never explained fully. And they just were like, oh, well, we'll let you hold on until next season. I don't like it when shows do that. I don't think that that's necessary. I think it's lazy storytelling. All of this is a spoiler alert. Like, if you haven't watched it, please go watch it because it's all coming out.
The other thing that I had a little bit of a problem with, the vilification of witchcraft in this, just because they started to celebrate nature more and they started to kind of understand, and I'm sure there's more to the story, and I'm sure that we'll see that next season. The witchcraft piece of things suddenly becomes an evil, and very pronounced and very pointedly evil in the very last episode.
Yes, and that character that went on that journey, and then others kind of followed, but what was her name?
Lottie,
that's right. She was, in the beginning, she was heavily medicated for some sort of psychiatric disorder that turned out to be that she was clairvoyant or an intuitive and could see things before they happen. And somehow that was a diagnosed mental illness for which he was heavily medicated. Her parents were very wealthy. And so there were some very complicated elements of this. But it was interesting because certainly it was a girls' Lord of the Flies to some degree. But it was really interesting to see them go from that night where they did the mushrooms, and then all of a sudden there's some kind of psychotic witches running around murdering each other. And it just was such an extreme shift that they never explained. They never came back and said, what was that? And why did that happen? And how did that turn into whichever member of the group was murdered? And then at least they lead us to believe that the person was eaten by the group.
I am convinced it's Jackie because she is the one the story kind of focuses around at the beginning. And then we constantly hear her best friend, Shauna, married her boyfriend when they came back. And they still see Jackie's parents every year. There's just so much there that something is up with Jackie.
Right, but Jackie froze to death. So who was the girl in the pit in the very first episode who fell on the spikes?
I'm not convinced Jackie's actually dead.
Ah, okay.
I feel like Jackie is probably the girl in the pit. I am not completely convinced that Jackie is actually dead. I feel like it's going to be one of those things where they all bring her inside and everybody huddles around her to warm her up, and she gets angry and vengeful, and then they turn on her for real and she goes running off because they are after her. That's what I think is going to happen.
Okay, that's fair. I think that it reminds me of Lost. We're just going to string you along for the sake of stringing you along and not give you enough information. And I feel like that's a flawed model.
Yeah. And see, I was a diehard fan of Lost until the writer's strike.
Right. Yes. So were we.
Which happened in the middle of it. And that's, I think, honestly, if you ask me, that's what killed Lost.
Agreed. That wasn't the case with this show. There is no writer's strike. There is no justification for starting the story, taking us through 10 episodes, and then ending up not giving us any real information. You get that little where Juliette Lewis gets grabbed from her thing, and then you realize, oh, well, it looks like Lottie started a cult, and you're spending the whole time wondering where the rest of the group is. Did they all die? Did they just, why don't we know? And then that very last 20 seconds of the season, oh, okay, these were her followers, and that's who killed Travis.
Yeah.
You know, that's my guess, at least. But it's all a guess, right? Like Lottie killed Travis, or maybe Travis did die by suicide.
No, I think Travis was killed by Thaisa.
Oh, why?
Because remember, she was so upset because the dog was dead. And then at the very end of that episode, the dog is in that shrine area.
Yes. And she had done it while she was sleepwalking.
And a number of times she was chewing on her own arm. She sent the family away because she couldn't protect them from herself.
Right.
There is the connection there of whatever happened there. He was starting to talk to somebody about it, or something was starting to come from it. And her sleepwalking self,
Dissociative.
was protecting her. I think she killed him.
What would be the reason to cut the head off the dog?
Because she needed his blood. The bowl was full of blood. There was the thing, like the skull hanging on the wall, and then there were the candles, and then there was the gold bowl.
Right, with blood, but what was that for? I mean, they did do that ritual.
Yeah.
With the blood in the beginning of their whole thing in the woods.
Yeah. I feel like she drained the dog's blood. That's why the bowl was full of blood and the dog's head was there, is to kind of signify this is where she got it, not Travis's blood. Because that was my first thought when I saw the bowl, was that it was Travis's blood.
Ah.
And then it panned out and you saw the dog, and I was like, okay, I feel a little better, but a little worse.
The reason that I thought it was so interesting is because clearly a lot of things happened that they were ashamed of, or they felt afraid of, or they didn't feel like they could talk about. But what is the weight of that? Of 25 years of carrying those secrets, and how has that impacted each of them differently. And it's really sort of a fascinating study with Travis and Natalie. You saw Travis and Natalie, they had already kind of been substance users, and you saw them fall into that pattern and on again, off again in a relationship and being sort of trauma bonded to one another. And in all of these different areas, you see these very interesting vignettes of what a significant trauma like this can result in. An exploration of all the different ways that people cope. And Shauna totally sort of dissociated and was just sort of sleepwalking through her life. Misty was always questionable, and she seemed a little bit like a sociopath.
I was just gonna say, I feel like she had sociopathic tendencies in the moments where everything was about her being the savior. She found the box that had the transmitter that would have saved them.
And she dismantled it.
Yeah, she destroyed it. She made sure that it would never work so that she could be the one to save everybody. And anytime
She kept hurting the coach so that she could take care of him, very sort of
Munchausen,
Munchausen syndrome by proxy. There was her sitting by the pool with the rat in the pool, and she's just watching it as it desperately swims around trying to get out of the water. What I assumed I was watching was that she was just watching that animal die. The only time she got positive attention or positive reinforcement of any kind was when she was taking care of people or being the person who saves the day. And so those two things coupled together creates a person who makes those decisions. She did have those tendencies where she was making questionable choices, and not an unsympathetic character, certainly a confused girl who didn't have the kind of support that she clearly needed.
she was the nurse at the senior citizens home where she was killing patients. We saw her kill a patient. The thing that made me question it was the reporter. She never hurt the reporter. Not that she never hurt her, because she did hurt her, but she didn't kill her.
Kidnapped her. Held her hostage.
She kidnapped her, but the only time she ever laid hands on her to cause pain was when she tried to escape and hurt the bird.
Right. And the reporter knew how to ingratiate herself. She was very good at manipulating Misty into getting what she wanted and becoming her friend and making her think your story is so important and you are important. And she had some intuition that she knew how to get to whatever was valuable enough to not hurt her. It was fascinating, to say the least. Christina Ricci killed that character. I thought she was incredible.
I didn't register that it was her for the first 2 episodes.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't until there was a moment where she stood somewhere in her posture, and I was just like, "That can't be." And then I looked it up. She's so good.
Yeah, it was like a transformative role. It was very, very impressive. And she was so scary because she was simultaneously terrifying, sympathetic, and entertaining. You just didn't want to stop watching her.
It's funny because there was a moment I was watching that I saw 2 other characters from 2 other things in her in this show. One was, Carol from Walking Dead.
Mhm. Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
You know, when they first got to Alexandria and she was, like, baking cookies and
And then verbally abusing that child and being absolutely terrifying.
oy, yeah, it was her. And have you seen the movie Fresh?
No, I haven't. I think you told me about it, but it felt a little too much for me.
She would absolutely be the person who would hand you the cup of tea, and then all of a sudden the room just starts to get fuzzy and fades away.
Yeah, well, she did that to the coach in the very beginning, and the role was amazing. So you have her who it's almost like the perfect storm of things. She might have been a little weird, she might have been a little needy. This situation really shot her into full-fledged moral injury, being able to fully justify all the decisions that she was making and not really have a conscience about any of it.
Because she was convinced she was a hero.
Right, and she needed to believe that because up until that point, people had just treated her like garbage and bullied her.
What happened, Coach?
You got beamed by a fastball. How many fingers am I holding up?
25?
25? Uh-oh.
25? Did you know you can save up to 25% off grocery store prices at BJ's Wholesale Club?
Good call, Ump. I'll save a ton on my Memorial Day cookout.
BJ's deals on patio furniture are a home run, too.
On your feet, son. Do you know where you are?
I'm at BJ's. Look at all the happy shoppers.
Save in club or shop on BJs.com and pick up in club or curbside. BJs, absurdly simple savings.
It's Jeep 4x4 season. Make your next adventure epic and hurry in now for great deals. Now, while qualified lessees who are residents of Massachusetts get a low-mileage lease on the 2023 Jeep Wrangler Willys 4xE for $359 a month for 36 months with $4,969 due at signing. Tax, title, license extra. No security deposit required. Call 1-888-925-JEEP for details. Requires dealer contribution, at least through Chrysler Capital. Extra charge for miles over 30,000. Residency restrictions apply. Take delivery by 5/29/23. Jeep is a registered trademark.
So you had like Juliette Lewis, who went I'm going to cope with this by using sex and drugs. And I mean, she was pretty clearly what might be considered a borderline personality disorder. At least that's how she was acting. Although we don't want to diagnose in the show. That was very much what her behavior was. And then Shauna sort of just sleepwalks through her whole life and doesn't ever feel anything or fully participate in anything. And then Christina Ricci is this sociopath or psychopath. It's hard to know which one. And then Thaisa is like the overachiever. I'm going to make good on all of this. She had goals before. Feels like she just went balls to the wall. You know, I am going to earn my right to be alive because bad things happened. And I'm very interested in knowing what happened to Van. I mean, it seems like she was a follower of Lottie's.
I'm also not convinced that Van survives.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
I feel like it's one of those things where the number of times we see Thaisa talking about how she has this sleepwalking issue, dissociative moments all the time, and they happen more than once in the woods already that we've seen. So there's a part of me that feels like being the person that is closest to her and the person who is sleeping next to her, especially with everything that happened with the dogs. I feel like Van is not going to make it out.
Well, I think it was very unlikely that Van survived the injury that she received to begin with. The fact that no one has gotten sick, no one has gotten an infection. We have the coach survived his leg being cut off. I mean, it's a very unrealistic plot anyway.
I also am curious, as they were flying across the country, like, where did they land that no one has found them?
Yeah, in the mountains of like, where were they flying from? I know they were going to Seattle. Where were they coming from?
They're flying from New Jersey to Seattle.
Yeah, so I mean, it's possible that they crashed in the Rocky Mountains somewhere and that it would be, I mean, people get lost up there pretty regularly. And at the same time, if you don't have a black box to find and there's just endless wilderness, then it's not unheard of. That's unlikely, but it's not unheard of that could happen.
The other thing that is very interesting to me was the whole thing with the dogs, because so many people claim they didn't see them. I had the question in my brain, especially after seeing the dog at the end, that I wondered if it wasn't Thaisa.
But Thaisa woke up in the tree to the screaming, and everybody was there.
But was she screaming because she had already been attacked? Because the only person who saw the dogs to pull the dogs off Van was Thaisa.
I don't know. I feel like they were they dogs or were they wolves? I think they were wolves, but I feel like at least my perception of it was definitely that they were there and that Thaisa had been sleepwalking and climbed the tree. Then she wasn't on the ground awake where she was supposed to be to warn them if there had been wolves, which was why she felt so bad. Not that she had done it, but that she had not been able to keep them safe. But I'm not opposed to that point of view. I just don't, that was not my perception.
There's also the part of me that wonders about the werewolf aspect of things. They did
Oh, wow.
I know. Hang with me for a second.
You're going a whole nother genre here.
Hang with me for a second. There were so many points where they talked about menstrual cycles and they talked about menstrual blood in this in the first like couple episodes before Shauna found out she was pregnant and when she found out she was pregnant. They talked a lot about cycles and blood. You know, the back of my brain,
Analytical, right? Like go.
my super creative brain was like, hey, you know what else goes by the moon cycle? And then the whole werewolf thing happened, or the whole wolf thing happened. And I was like, huh. I mean, I wouldn't put anything past the show at this moment.
No, because I don't know.
Because you got the guy with the antlers. Who is that guy and when did they actually meet him?
Guy with the antlers.
See, this is what you get for fast forwarding through the first 2 episodes. One of the flashbacks that Shauna has in either the first or second episode, you see her like having flashes of these people all sitting in a circle in the woods. And in the head chair, there's a guy who has the head of a deer and he's got the antlers of like a 5-point buck.
I mean, I remember seeing the buck with the bloody antlers.
But this was a person wearing those wearing not those exact antlers.
Right. Well, I also assumed it was Lottie who was at the head of the circle who was wearing the antlers on her head with like a veil.
Maybe that's what I saw.
He was the leader of
And that explains the cult. Yeah.
where they started and where they ended. Whatever that first episode was where they were all or sitting around that circle wearing what we then came to learn were their like prom outfits with the skinned animals and the head pieces and all of that stuff, but I don't remember a guy with antlers.
Maybe it was Lottie and I just didn't register it because she had her hair so tight back.
Whoever that person was that I'm remembering had like a white piece of cloth that was like lace or something over their face, so you couldn't actually see who it was. So we could be thinking about 2 different things.
No, you're right. I forgot about cloth. But then that begs the question, is it Van?
With the face covered? Well, the reason I don't think it was Van is because of the last, I don't know, episode or 2 where Lottie was very clearly becoming the leader. And Van and there was another person that Lottie was putting some sort of offering inside of a tree stump. And so it was like a triangle. Van was behind her on one side, off diagonally, and then there was another person who I can't at this moment remember. Also the little brother, we just never found him. He just disappeared and does it. You know, they looked for him for a few minutes and then we just never found him. But Van was so heavily traumatized by what happened to her that she said she thought she had a vision after she got attacked by the wolves. And that was what I understood. Not that there was a debate as to what happened to Van, but that Van saw something else that no one else saw. That she had a vision after she was attacked when she was laying there. We weren't sure if she was going to die or not, where she saw something and she then all of a sudden had this newfound belief in a supernatural or godlike power or in the power that Lottie had or the power of nature or whatever it was. It wasn't ever really explained, but she needed to have that belief to be able to process and make sense of things. And so putting her faith in whatever this power is, you know, the way to describe what's going on with Lottie, but certainly she's intuitive. She sees things before they happen. And she doesn't always know what that means. She has flashes. And the whole thing about the red smoke in the sky and the river of blood that she told them about, if they had turned back at the river of blood, then everything wouldn't have happened to Van and they would have been saved. So I think that we all do that in moments of extreme distress where things just aren't making any sense. We try to find meaning. We try to make sense of things by any means necessary. And these are children. And so that was what Van grabbed onto for herself, was just, okay, well, I'm just going to follow Lottie. She knows what is going on and she feels like the safe person. And the problem is that Lottie didn't seem so safe. It wasn't because she was psychic or intuitive or any of those things. It just seemed like she was kind of angry and vengeful and not a particularly nice person.
Yeah, there's something supernatural in this. I feel very strongly. I don't know what branch of supernatural they're going for, because when they're in that upstairs bedroom of the cabin, Lottie's standing at the window, and then all of a sudden the window slams itself shut, and that's when everything started for her. So I feel like there's also that bit of, is she possessed?
No, I think that she's intuitive. I think that there's something that's keeping them there, which is why their compass didn't work. There's something that kept whoever the guy was that was there before. He had a plane that was filled with gasoline, and when the girl tried to fly it away, it burst into flames completely out of nowhere and never explained. Just all of a sudden, the teddy bear bursts into flames, and then the plane explodes, and that's it. And yeah, clearly there's some kind of supernatural force or something that wants to keep them there, which very much feels like Lost to me. And at the same time, I don't know if I would go so far as to say they're werewolves, but I'm not shutting down any possibility.
The wolves thing was like out of left field and then never spoken of again. And there's a lot of obsession with the menstrual cycle and menses and the moon.
Well, they're also teenage girls, and I think there is a lot of focus on your period when you're a teenage girl.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I really thought that with all the extra elements of it, it was actually a really interesting and somewhat honest portrayal of untreated trauma. This is a thing that happened, and we just came home and pretended that it never happened and went about our lives. And that's not a thing. You can try, but this stuff emerges. It comes out in other ways if you don't let it out. And Thaisa being so, quote unquote, tightly wound and type A is a perfect example of that. If you don't let it out when you're awake, it'll come out when you're sleeping. It's gonna find its way.
It's just gonna come out. It's gotta come out somewhere. The water has to run. Or Shauna is the other one, the boyfriend. She becomes so numb, and then suddenly the person that makes her feel becomes the most suspicious person in the world, only to find out that she was betrayed by the only person who she trusted.
And she wasn't betrayed by that person in the way that she thought she was. She was assuming he was having an affair, and so then went out and had an affair of her own rather than going to him, communicating with him. It just everything is just fully shut down, and we just see a person making assumptions left and right and acting on those assumptions.
Well, and I feel like her assumptions were based in guilt, because a family member of mine always used to say, if they cheat with you, they'll cheat on you.
Mm-hmm.
He cheated with her. So I think that just kind of lived in her brain.
That's right. She operated off of that feeling of shame and disgust and self-loathing that she had done that to her best friend, and simultaneously always felt like she was the sidekick to the best friend. So she never believed, even after all the years that they were together, she never believed that he actually wanted her, and that it was guilt or it was some sort of bond between the two of them because they had both loved Jackie. They continued to be together. We also don't know what ever happened to their baby.
Yeah, it's the daughter.
No, it's not. It can't be. The daughter's 16. The accident happened 25 years ago. There's no way that it can be the daughter.
Yeah, but I thought that the older version was taking place in 2000.
The accident happened in 1996. And the girl's a teenager. She's in high school.
I don't know why. I just locked into the fact that it must have been her daughter, or it must have been their kid.
Yeah, well, if it was happening in 2000, then the kid would only be 4.
So I'm totally wrong either way.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it could have been happening in 2000, whatever, 12. Either way, there's a lot of unanswered questions. I do think that in a weird way, Jeff redeemed himself, even though he did this horrible thing and exploited their experience and all of it by blackmailing them. At the same time, he wasn't cheating on her, and he was doing this thing to save the business so that he could continue providing for this family. And he was very dedicated to the family. Misguided, yes, no excuse, 100%. But it almost felt like it definitely was that they were sort of stronger in the end than they had been before, because everything came out. There wasn't any more assumption emotion. They were just, everything was said out loud. I do think there's value in that. So I wanted to talk about this show because I did think that it was an interesting portrayal of trauma and all the different ways that it can impact people. And even though it was very sensationalized, there was a decent amount of truth to it. A lot to be said for not keeping silent and for healing when something terrible happens. And also the bond that connects people when they go through something like this together.
And I think it's interesting too to see the bond between the 4 survivors that we've seen so far and the I love you, I hate you.
They're like sisters. They are. It's like a shorthand that they all have with one another that they don't have with anyone else. And that's one of the things that trauma does, is that it makes it difficult to trust people. It makes it difficult to trust your perceptions of the world. And that's why those trauma bonds can be so strong, is because you feel so separate from the rest of the world after something like that happens to you. You feel so no one else knows what I went through. I feel so different than everyone else that those connections can be very powerful. Oftentimes, trauma bonds are also very maladaptive and dysfunctional, as they are in this situation. But it is interesting to see how connected they are and how much they do care about each other and will do anything. I think we could have a whole show just talking about moral injury, though, and about like what certain circumstances will do to a person's ability to justify their decisions. Thank you for having this conversation with me.
Oh yeah. I'm glad that you watched it.
I'm always so interested that in the way that we watch the same thing and we see totally different things. And that's just fascinating.
Oh yeah.
It's just completely fascinating. Everybody should watch a show with your friend and then come back together and talk about it.
Yeah, don't watch it in the same room though, because then you talk through the whole thing.
Yeah, no.
You have to watch it separately and then come back and talk about it.
What you learned. What's a show that, means a lot to you, that helps you to cope better or makes you think or surprises you at how much it impacts you? Show, podcast, music, movie, we've got a lot of other stuff coming. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm excited for this journey. We're able to be here bringing our whole selves, changing the conversation around mental health and related issues thanks to support from our generous sponsor, Carol Weinstein. It's not your job to stay quiet so others can stay comfortable. Share your stories, questions, or thoughts with us on Facebook at IYCSM, Instagram at the If You Could See Me Project, TikTok at If You Could See Me. And if you're ready to get more involved, join the movement by becoming a Patreon subscriber. We are the If You Could See Me Project on patreon.com. We hope to see you soon. I'll be right back here next week. I hope you'll join me.
What happened, Coach?
You got beamed by a fastball. How many fingers am I holding up?
25?
25? Uh-oh.
25? Did you know you can save up to 25% off grocery store prices at BJ's Wholesale Club?
Good call, Ump. I'll save a ton on my Memorial Day cookout.
BJ's deals on patio furniture are a home run, too.
On your feet, son. Do you know where you are?
I'm at BJ's. Look at all the happy shoppers.
Save in club or shop on BJs.com and pick up in club or curbside. BJ's, absurdly simple savings.
What happened, Coach?
You got beamed by a fastball. How many fingers am I holding up?
25?
25? Uh-oh.
25? Did you know you can save up to 25% off grocery store prices at BJ's Wholesale Club?
Good call, Ump. I'll save a ton on my Memorial Day cookout.
BJ's deals on patio furniture are a home run, too.
On your feet, son. Do you know where you are?
I'm at BJ's. Look at all the happy shoppers.
Save in club or shop on BJs.com and pick up in club or curbside. BJ's, absurdly simple savings.